Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. We want to let you know that we have once again been honored with a nomination for the Hockey Podcast of the Year via the Sports Podcasting Awards. And all you need to do to help us is go to ourkidsplayhockey.com and click on the Vote Now button. It asks you a couple questions. You're in and you're out, and you have voted for us for Hockey Podcast of the Year. I want to thank you all for being a wonderful, wonderful audience and helping us get to this stature of hockey podcasting, because we've done it as a family, as the hockey friends and families around the world. Thanks so much and enjoy this episode of Our Kids Play Hockey. What's up, everybody? Welcome to a special edition of Our Kids Play Hockey this week. We're joined by Bryce Salvador, former captain of the New Jersey Devils. He had a very long NHL career, and he's sharing with us today a story about perspective, something that happened with him and his youth hockey team, a 12U team, in which he had to make a really tough decision to pull out of a tournament at the last moment, and it came with a lot of controversy, and he's here to share with us the story of why he put the mental fitness of his kids first ahead of a championship. It's a really great discussion with a lot of different perspectives. And again, that is the purpose of the episode, to discuss perspective and how we're treating youth athletes, how we're treating youth hockey, and how we can move forward together. So enjoy this special edition of Our Kids Play Hockey with Bryce Salvador. Hello, hockey friends and families around the world. Welcome to a special edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. We'll jump right into it. I'm Lee Elias. That's Christy Casciano-Burns and Mike Benelli. And we are joined today by the former captain of New Jersey Devils, had a great NHL career with the St. Louis Blues and the Devils. Bryce Salvador is here joining us today with a very special topic. And Bryce, we're going to jump right into it. You asked us to come on the show today to talk about an event that happened with youth hockey coaching that you were involved with this past weekend. So let's just jump right in with the story. Tell us what happened, and we'll kind of dive into a conversation right afterwards.
Okay. Well, first off, thanks for having me. And I think it's important that, we have these type of discussions and especially with people that have platforms like what you guys are doing. And so I think it's important, from what I've now went through over this past weekend, to, if you're in a position of, we'll say, leadership, or you're looked up to, you do have a social responsibility, to voice your opinion, right? Not saying that my opinion is always going to be the right one, but if you're in this situation when you're going into rinks and you're been doing it for years, and you see all the fighting that's going on between the parents, between the kids, you see the refs getting screamed at, the refs now quitting. There's not enough refs. And everyone just cringes every time they go to watch a youth hockey game. Something needs to be said. And that's kind of where I've come to. And what happened this past weekend, it was just, it's probably one in a million, in the perspective of, we had two kids end up going to the hospital. They're 12 years old. It's Halloween weekend. The first kid is still in the hospital. This is, when we're recording, this is Wednesday. So he went on the hospital on Saturday. He's going to be released today. So these are not injuries that, someone sprained their ankle or took a shot and their foot swelled up, or they, sprained their wrist, or they maybe have a broken finger. These are serious injuries that were traumatic experiences for 12-year-olds. So we had this first injury that happened Saturday morning, right? And the reason why I want to preface the time frame here, because as I take everyone's opinion on my ultimate decision, a lot of it was, well, you have teams that have traveled all this distance to come play. How can you not finish this game? Well, this is Saturday morning, right? We have a kid that ends up in the hospital. We played two more games after this one kid that was in the hospital. So we did rally around an injury to continue playing. So that needs, I want to make that point where, everyone's saying, well, it's hockey, it's sports. Absolutely, right? Injuries are a part of life. And I know how to manage those moments, even with 12-year-olds. And so one kid's in the hospital, we play two games, right? In the second game, which is now Sunday morning, it's the semifinals. The minute left, we're up 4-1. And where this kind of all ties into this conversation, parents' egos, coaches' egos. Now you're losing a game against a team that you really want to beat. And we have a kid take advantage of another kid in a vulnerable situation. And this kid is, really hurt. He's on the ice. He's not moving. It's 1 minute left in the game. It's now emotions are going. This is the second kid that our team is now having to see go to the hospital. And what's really important in this situation is the traumatic visual effects that this also has on the kids. Anytime an ambulance comes to a rink, everyone's worst nightmares, right, are fresh in their minds, thinking, "Oh my gosh, is this that moment?" And this is even more traumatic to a kid to see one of their teammates at 12 get taken off the ice and stretcher. So I really want people to understand, like, a 12-year-old kid does not know how to deal with that, doesn't know how to compartmentalize that in his brain. And so now we got our second kid. Our kids are losing their minds. They're 12. They're going into locker rooms trying to fight. They're trying to, what's going on here? And the refs don't know what to do. I'm sure the other team doesn't really know what to do at this point. And then the parents are getting upset. And so at this moment, I'm like, okay, we've got two kids in the hospital. What are we going to do? It's a championship game. This team came all the way. Our family also traveled. There's money, it's not just one team came. And immediately I just had to process that what I'm going to have to do as an adult to get these kids in the right mindset to play another game. And so we can go into that maybe as this conversation goes on, some of the different elements, but I think to keep this moving along. So I made the decision at that point that there's no way that it would be ethical to put these kids back on the ice. So, and I'm full, and transparent and not being a hypocrite. I've said, like, maybe 3 weeks ago, maybe a year, like, I would probably too get caught up in the emotions. Say, you know what, maybe the kid's going to be okay. This is a championship game. We got to play. But, and I say, I don't want to draw parallels to this emotional weekend to what Kyle Beach is going through and all that. But I really all of a sudden felt this situation was, Bryce, you've been coming into rinks for 5-6 years now. You're seeing the fighting. You're seeing where this is going. If you're not going to make the right decision here, who is going to? And so that's in part why I said, okay, we can't play this game. It's not right. As I get into the lobby to kind of just talk this over with the other coach, with at that point the rink director, and then later the tournament director, the mindset in the lobby was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're not going to play this game? Nobody was even asking about how the kids were doing. They're like, okay, look, like, how many kids you still got left?
Yeah.
What do you, like, excuse me? Like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, I'm like, physically want me to go count how many kids we have left? So just to put them on the ice to play a game that absolutely meant, and I'm cautious with this, meant nothing big picture in the moment. Yes, 12-year-olds want to play. They want to compete. They want to win that championship game. I 100% get that. But I also saw that when I'm looking across the room, it's all these parents and the coaching staff, and they really want this game more than anything. All right. So at that point, it's just, we were having an irrational conversation with grown adults is saying, like, you're really going to just pack up and leave. And yeah, I am. And after that, you got parents screaming and fighting, screaming at kids screaming at parents. And so I walk out of this rink and I'm like, at that moment, like, I got to say something. I got to do something. Not that I think that anything's going to change overnight.
Right.
But I need to start having a dialogue with people and just say, hey, how can we change things? So that's kind of the events and how they unfolded. And I'd love to kind of go into any, dissect any parts of this, because I know there's lots there. And so I'm open to kind of, hear what you guys want to talk about from these experiences.
Right.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I'm going to stay in my lane as a hockey parent. And I'm going to tell you, I am not shocked at all at the reaction that you got from those parents. Am I disappointed? Absolutely. Is it frustrating? Yes, this has been building up for years. We've been in these situations too. And I wish we had a coach as brave as you, as rational as you, to have done the same thing. Because, here's the thing, it's a game. And what are you teaching your kids by saying, yeah, we're going to keep playing. Let's not even think about the 2 kids in the hospital. Are you kidding me? I applaud you. Thank you. I wish we had more rational, sensible, compassionate, caring coaches like you in the hockey world, because we need you.
Well, I really appreciate that, Kristen. Thank you. And like I said, and I'm very cautious to not say that I am perfect, that I'm a perfect coach, because I've been in those emotional moments, and I honestly don't know if the Kyle Beach situation had come out had I maybe acted as I did, right? Where I really just thought, hey, like, we just can't keep doing this. And if I cannot pave a path for other coaches to have the courage, nobody's going to, because I'm not, I do understand the position that other teams are in, coaches are in, families, the resources, the energy, everything that we're doing for our sons and daughters. And I probably, if it wasn't me, I don't think another coach would have been in the position to not have played that game. So I think as I look back, one of the takeaways I hope that come from here is maybe I've created that safe space for other coaches to say, you know what, this isn't right. Now, and I'm also saying that, because it's not that, hey, if someone gets injured, we don't play games. It's not that at all. We're not talking about a kid that sprained his ankle. We're talking about the severity of the visual impact that these kids had. So I want to also preface that.
Yeah. And I think, just for context here, right, for the audience, for anybody listening to Bryce and understanding, the level of play that these kids are at, this is the pinnacle of this age group, right? This is all the investment of all these people. So there's already a prejudged, I guess, expectation, right? That parents are like, well, we're traveling from California, from Alaska, from Florida. We're all like meeting together to compete. And I think what Bryce was doing in this moment, which when I really look at it as a coach at any level, right? Forget about this elite level of kid and their kids, is that the emotions now those kids have to try to process if they play. And you see this all the time. The emotion of the kids and the parents and the coach, this situation can get worse because then another kid's going to get injured as bad or worse. Because now, I mean, Bryce used those terms, right? Of, the kids are out for blood. They want to go, they want retribution. The parents have already gotten in their ear, like, you need to stand up for your teammate and show them that you're not going to, take it. And it just snowballs. Now imagine on a Sunday afternoon, what a tournament director and now 2 coaches have to deal with. Let's thank God that there's 2 kids that are okay. They were injured, but think about the ramifications of continuing to play and where that could have escalated. And I think having this perspective of saying, let's tone it down. Let's all relax. Let's get perspective of where we're at in the scheme of life here. And how can we still teach, have a teachable moment? To Bryce's point, we're not asking the kids to be soft. We're not asking them not to compete. We're not asking them not to battle through injury. This is bigger and more important than injury. It's really the fact that there's a person in power that has the ability to say, we can go one way or the other. And I can take the fact that my ego is not broken, that I didn't get to bring home a trophy. And hopefully we can teach these kids that, there are ways to de-escalate. And again, they're not getting paid. It's not a playoff game where somebody gets hurt, in the NHL, and Bryce is, coming from that level of play. I'm sure there's a lot of times you've seen players get carted off on a stretcher in your career. And you as an adult have to process that in the locker room as a professional hockey playing adult, and how hard that is to go out and play.
Well, Mike, you're exactly right. And that's a perspective that I've lived through and I have. And that was what was also going through my mind when you have a traumatic injury. And you're exactly right. And in those milliseconds, I'm thinking, okay, what I'm going to have to do to the mindsets of these kids to get them to play is not ethical, right? Because there's only two ways. I've been on benches when people have been severely hurt. And when you're paid, you tell yourself it's a job. And you're also being like, you know what? They're going to be fine. There's medical staff right down the hallway. There's an ambulance waiting on site. They've got surgeons. They got plastic surgeons. They're going to be getting the best care. They don't have to drive 30, 40 minutes to try to find a hospital that may or may not take them, right? So it's a different environment. And even, at different levels of junior, they're better equipped for injury. So first off, if you're a professional like I was, it's a job. I'm going to go there. I'm getting paid. And I have to tell myself that, because if your mindset is scared or you're worried, you're going to get hurt, because you need to be aggressive. And so for these kids, to get them to play that next game, I'm going to have to rally them now around two players. I'm going to have to protect them and say, hey, you know what? You better be ready to go take blood, because I know if they're going to be scared, they're going to get hurt. So I have to immediately change their mindset to be in attacker mode. And that isn't healthy for a 12-year-old. So then what a lot of people won't take into account is that I'm actually thinking about the other team, because God forbid the first shift, one of their kids accidentally trips one of my kids and it looks bad. They're going to lose their mind. That game will probably take 3 hours to finish.
Right.
And so
right. But one of your kids not processing that, and dad's in his ear, right? You've got to go out and send a message that our team doesn't take this. And he rips a kid from behind on the first shift. Yeah. And now you have forget about what it does mentally for that kid. Because I've been on so many ice rinks and surfaces. Well, forget it. Lacrosse, baseball. When little children, the 12-year-old is little children. I don't care how you classify them in the scheme of selects and AAAs, right? They're children. Hit somebody from behind, injure somebody, throws a ball at somebody's head by mistake. They have trauma. The person inflicting, nobody goes out there trying to hit somebody from behind. I really, truly believe that. I think you even said that in one of your conversations, right, Bryce? That you don't think that there's 12-year-olds out there hunting kids down, trying to, cross-check them from behind and break their leg. But when it happens, it's just as traumatic for the kid that injured the player. And now, and again, we don't think, like even when I teach kids to protect themselves going into the boards, I'm like, there's nothing you can do about the person's instability behind you. Like, you need to prepare yourself. So I think, knowing that it's not only protecting your own team, and it sounds weird, right? Because everything, that's a bunch of crap. You're not protecting anybody else, the other team. But in your world, in with knowing what you would have to do at the NHL level, the next period's a line brawl.
Yeah.
And that's. But I don't think people have to be able to say that's not hockey. That's not real hockey. That's hockey at some point. That's not 12-year-old hockey.
Yeah, it's not 12-year-old hockey. And I think that's critical. Like, it's not like these kids, we were playing for the national championship at Bantam, right? Where, hey, okay, people want to win that championship. It's a tournament. Yes, it's important for kids and everyone that came there, and right. But look, we all got our guaranteed 5 games, right? It wasn't guaranteed that we're all going to be in the finals. Right. And so this was going to be the 6th game. Maybe, I know from a tournament perspective, it's tough on them to, have an outcome like this. And so they're scrambling. But we have to keep going back to perspective, right? So at 12 years old, they're not being paid, right? They're young, they're developing. How do we create this environment for them, right? Because as they get into Bantam, now there's hitting, right? And that's a whole different can of worms. But we need to make sure that kids feel confident and strong and safe going into bantam so that they want to stay in the game. Yeah. Right. Because at the end of the day, we just see numbers dwindling in all different aspects of the youth sports, and whether it be coaches, whether it be, refs, most importantly refs, because, they've really had enough. And so you're exactly right. And I just want to, really always keep circling back to the perspective of this particular moment, probably one in 100,000 that an ambulance comes. So it's not something that happens all the time.
Look, this is what I'd like to do, Bryce, because we want to use this as an educational moment too. We're always talking on this show, always, about how the game is more than just the game. Life lessons, the things you take from the game to grow as a human being are just as important as winning. And this is something I want to say, even if it was the Bantam National Championship. All right, here's the deal. What you've done here is you've created a moment, an inspirational moment that no one would have remembered who won this tournament 10 years from now, but every one of these kids is going to remember that you did this. All right. And as they get older, and hopefully the parents too, they'll start to understand more why. We're also, and you've alluded to this multiple times, we're living in a time period now where mental fitness is starting to come to the forefront of a lot of conversations, whereas even 10 years ago, it didn't. I mean, that's one of the issues with how the Kyle Beach situation happened, is it was not top of mind and it was handled poorly for that reason. Now mental fitness is at the forefront of a lot of conversations. See it with Simone Biles, we've seen it all over. And you had a moment of clairvoyancy where, and this is what I want to dissect so the audience can understand, and you've been doing this. Let's look at the minute by minute here. You weren't just thinking about the players that were injured. You weren't just thinking about your own players. You weren't just thinking about the other team. You're thinking about all of it one piece at a time. I think we should walk through that to really educate any coaches or players or parents listening of how you came to this point, right? Because one of the things I loved in your article with The Athletic, you should all read that if you haven't had a chance, is you're talking about these are pubescent kids. At 12 years old, I couldn't control myself off the ice, much less on the ice, right? And that all played into your decision. So if you could, just for the listeners, let's really dissect the moments of this decision, right? And how you came to this point, the things that you thought about, and how you eventually landed on this. We are not playing the game.
Yeah, well, it really starts with, the first injury. We had a kid go hard into the post. He's trying to defend a goal from happening, hits the net, goes, really hard. The wind's knocked at him. Kind of comes to, right? And the first thing he says when he comes out, he's like, "Did they score?" Right. And I'm just like, how sincere and the caring for the team over himself first was just priceless. And those are just type of moments. Right. And this kid was tough as nails. He finished the game. Right. Then we find out that, it's more serious than we actually thought. And like I said, he's just getting out of the hospital today. So right off the bat, this was the last game of the round robin. So just for everybody, what a coach goes through now, we do what we all do. Okay, well, we have an injury. We're using this as a rally moment, right? So, we get this player's jersey, we hang it up in the locker room. This is for him. Kids are touching the jersey, they're going out. So I know how to make sure the kids are safe and how to kind of use moments as teaching moments and make them feel that, hey, not to get scared about injuries, right? That things are going to be fine and we can play. And so, but also in the back of my mind, just understanding like, hey, it's a fragile moment. These kids are crying, right? When they see injury still. And there's always the fear factor from the parents. So I'm managing all that. We get through the game and the kids play well. They play great. That was one of those moments. But I'm always very cognizant of the mental health of the kids. Like, sometimes people just say, well, you just get them out. I'm like, no, you just can't keep jacking up 12-year-olds to play a game emotionally and mentally and rallying them up. Like they need moments to calm down. As you go up, like, in the NHL, if we want to, like, they don't play 6 games in 2.5 days, right? That you mentally, energy, emotionally, you can't stay that high in the moment that long. It's not healthy. So
and every day and doing that multiple weekends in a row. I mean, it's not like it's one tournament a month.
Yeah. So just alone, when you think about it from that perspective, how amazing our youth are, that they are able to, well, maybe some people say maybe they're not playing at their highest level, but are able to play multiple games over multiple days and be effective and just be amazing at times. But we also have to know that, okay, they also need to come down. So, Lee, so that first moment, that's already in the back of my mind. Okay, so they played well, right. Everyone responded well. So now we're going into the semifinal games.
Bryce, I do want to note, just from what you said, again, just kind of walking the audience through this, that the mental health, again, was there from the start, right? So you're already managing that. You're already considering that. The question I have for our viewers and listeners is, how often do you do that? And how do you compartmentalize it? Is it just about winning, or is that? So we already have a milestone here of mental health being in the picture. All right. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's fair to say is, maybe I should say, like, I just all of a sudden, it just wasn't there. And if I really go back several years, like when I really got involved in youth hockey, Lee, is now that I've learned so much by making mistakes, right, to where I am now, that's, in part of probably a lot of why I was able to really process the emotion and the situation that these kids are in.
Right.
Because look, I always had the mindset of, trying to have, a very strong team, which we do, so that the environment of these kids that are practicing, I'm all about practicing, not so much about games, about practicing. So if you have, kids that are in part, like pretty much all the same skill set, you can have a lot more development. And what ended up happening through that is the team became really strong. I had lots of players that wanted to come play on my team. Because at first people didn't think I could coach. And then, they were scrutinizing me that I couldn't coach, which I tell everybody, you're exactly right. I didn't know how to coach, 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds. I learned quickly. But what ended up happening as I started to get, really good players all wanting to come to the team is, you started to see the anxiety and the mental exhaustion from kids of always having to be their best. So over the last several years, my team's been very strong. Every team is using, my team as the gold standard. So every time we're playing, these kids are playing their Stanley Cup game. So I started to understand, like, Bryce, okay, like, geez, when you're in the NHL, like when you played an emotional game, like you're exhausted mentally. And then I started realizing, like, geez, these kids just played a team that was lights out. Like, and I was like, and then the next day I was like, why aren't you skating hard? Why aren't you this? And I started realizing, like, holy cow, Bryce, they just played a Stanley Cup game, right? I was really trying to equate it. And people may laugh at that and may say I'm losing my mind, but no, I started to realize, which on one side I thought was great from a development perspective. So, and what I mean by that is I started seeing that every team that we played, it became a real great game, a great development game. Kids on the other side were elevating their game. Goalies were playing best. The coaching staff on the other team, they were making sure they were prepared because they knew if they're going to play, the team that I coached, that, hey, we got to be good. We got to make sure everybody's focused. And so it was a really good game from the development perspective, from that element, right? Like, maybe some people have different opinions on that, but I really saw, wow, this is great learning environment. But then I started to see, wow, like this is taking a toll on my kids, right? They're 10, no, they're 8, they're 9, they're 10, they're 11. Like every time we go in the rink, like we're getting every team's best. So I know that's long-windedly, but that's kind of, I started to understand the emotional mental health,
right,
of the families, right? And so I started like reducing practices. So like, if we had a real big tournament, we went to the finals, we didn't practice that week when we got back. I gave that week off to the families. people think I'm losing my mind, right? At first, well, leave me not practice. We're not practicing. What? Like, no, actually, because, I know how I went if I went through a round of playoffs. I needed to shut down for a couple of days. So I started doing that, and I started to see that when we got back to practice the next weekend, kids were in such a better mental place versus just getting run down. So again, that's kind of how I came to this over 5 years. I didn't really know this. I was making wrong decisions. I was going to tournaments. I was being like the team we played, like, okay, we need to win this game because, it's going to affect the rankings, or we need to get tournaments or whatever, recruiting, all that type of stuff. Right.
You should have just called me earlier. You should have called me earlier.
Yeah. Well, Mike was known each other for a while. I did,
But good for you, Bryce, too, recognizing their kids, because so many times, and I've seen this over the years with my own kids, especially if it's a high-performing team, the expectations are so high, and the coach sometimes loses sight that they're still children, and they needed to be treated like children, not as, NHL stars who need to show up and be on time, and let them be kids. Good for you to.
And Christy, I think it's a great way to view it too, because at the highest levels, let's call it college, major, junior, pro, they gear it up. It's geared up Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and then they're done.
Right.
Not Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Saturday night, Sunday morning, and then back to practice on Monday because we have another competition. So it's huge for these kids to be able to, mentally and physically. But that physical fatigue adds to the mental fatigue, and this adds. And then what do you do, Bryce? Right, as a coach, now Monday's practice, they stink. You get frustrated. You're screaming and yelling at them because they're not making passes and they're not paying attention. But how could they? They just played 3 Stanley Cup games in a row, and I think that's where I was a coach. Like, you love playing the team that had to play that high game, right? Because like, wow, now we got them on the game where they won. It was such an emotional win. We might get them now because they're emotionally drained. Yeah. Now imagine doing that for 23 weeks in a row. And I think that's where the perspective comes from, not only somebody that's played at the pro level, but somebody that is watching their children, your child, and other kids, other people's children, and saying, I feel exhausted. Like, what do you feel like? And I think if you really ask a lot of mom and dads, they're exhausted, but they just don't know. They don't have the capacity to sit in that hallway after that game and say, Bryce, my kid is mentally exhausted. I'm leaving the game. Right.
Especially if they get a taste of winning and succeeding. And, it's hard to step back from that, it's like an addiction. Oh, well, we got to keep working them hard. We got to keep getting up. We got to do this. We got to do this. Look at us. Look how great we're doing. Yeah. And it's hard to step back and say, whoa, time out.
I want to remind everybody too.
They're kids.
Yeah, I want to remind everybody too. 18 down, you're dealing with a lot more than just hockey. All right. A lot of these kids might be playing multiple sports, so they're getting this from multiple angles. Bryce, you're talking about 12-year-olds. Look, at 12, I had a lot on my mind. Okay. A lot of new thoughts coming to my mind that had never been there before. There's a lot going on. And, one of the things that, and Bryce, I want to jump back to you on this, is that I hear this a lot from parents. Well, I did it that way and I turned out fine. And you know what? You're not fine. You just don't realize it.
You screwed up.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things of, and Bryce, look, this is one of the things I love is that, you made yourself vulnerable there. Like, look, I didn't know what I was doing when I started. I had to learn. We don't say things like that enough. Right? We don't say things like that. Oh, no, I turned out fine. But you're not. You're not. You didn't put your mental fitness anywhere on the charts. I'm not going to even say first. And the thing is that we get so focused on winning and the grind that then we get into the real world after 18. Again, Bryce, obviously you went to the NHL. You work into the civilian world, and we can't work with each other. And then it's always about the bottom line. It's always about winning. We don't take time to even care about each other. Right. So again, I'm not trying to expand this into something bigger or a bigger conversation. I'm just trying to say you took a moment of pause and reflection. You used your experience and said, okay, we're not fine. All right. So again, everything you're saying is great. I love that we're dissecting this, like almost documenting it. Right. Let's go to the moment now. Again, the second injury happens. I want to reiterate, you said these kids are not controlling themselves. They're out for blood. they're mentally compromised, right? You probably are mentally compromised. The parents are mentally compromised. So walk us to the moment of that decision of, was it a gradual kind of coming to of like, you know what, I don't think we should, okay, I've decided this, or was there a snap moment where you said, we're not playing this game? And then I do want to dive into the reaction, not to call anybody out, but I think that's an important part of the story.
Well, yeah. Well, look, the moment was, you know, I'm holding, you know, this kid's hand, right? The mom comes on the ice, you know, they're crying, and you don't know, you're like, all the worst possible thoughts are going through your mind. Right. And then you're kind of like, if I'm being emotionally impacted in this, I can't imagine. And if you talk to my wife, she's like, I show no emotion. Right. So if I can get emotional about a situation, you know, I can only imagine what everybody else is going through. You know, yes, it's isolated to our team, right? The other teams are like, hey, yeah, injuries happen. Okay. I appreciate that and understand that, but it's my responsibility to protect my team. And so at that moment, then I was just like, there's no way I'm going to try to downplay this with my players. Right. Because that's not the right thing to do. You know, and then I later find out. So I said, this game's got to be called off, you know, forfeit it, however we're going to do it. And then I just, you know, as I'm walking to the lobby, you know, my kids are going crazy. They're circling dressing rooms, right? You're just like, holy cow, I got some Philly kids on this team, right? These guys are tough, right? So and I gotta, you know, bring everybody down. I know you live in Philly, Lee.
Yeah,
so
I'll take the compliment.
For you. So, and you know, and look, like I said, I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. Like, hey, I'm not saying I never, you know, went after somebody. You know, I like to fight. You know, I have a switch, right? I know how intense and how aggressive you need to be in hockey and how to have success and all that. So I understand there's that aspect, but 12, there's no hitting, right? These kids haven't hit puberty, right? So it's a different animal from that perspective. So now as I get into the lobby, you're asking, you know, it just the mindset, which is a product of the last 10 years of youth hockey or whatever, I don't know, whatever you want to say is, you know, we're all built around, we got to win this championship game. Absolutely. You know, and maybe, well, I know for a fact because, you know, my team has won championships, right? That, you know, and I hate to say this but I'm going to be truthful. Like, it didn't mean much to us at that moment because we've had, right? So this is why I do understand part of the perspective of the other team and the other coach, right? They wanted to come and they wanted to win this. They wanted to, you know, beat my team. Or I hate using the word my team. They're not, you know, because I possess it, like our team. And so I totally understand that, right? But it's when you're talking to somebody for 5-10 minutes and you really can't get through to them that like the game is going to happen, where you have to start saying, hey, like, what if it was your kid
right
on the stretcher, right? And then when you start talking like that, you start to see a little bit of thinking going on, but they're still not getting it. It's like, you're still going to leave. Yeah. We're concerned about the kid, but you're still going to leave. Right. So at that point, I just realized, like, you know, if I cannot really stand up and almost not get bullied into playing this game, then no coach will ever be able to. Right. And it's not to you said, Lee, not to single out the coach or the parents and all that. It's because I totally appreciate.
Yeah. We're not trying to call anybody out, and I don't think you are either. So I just
and I don't think the emotion of the other team is the same. It's your family, it's your kids. You're with them every day, right? And you're in the locker room and feeling the you know, that bubbling up, like you're closest to it. I wouldn't expect the other team or the other coach, the other parents. They weren't even in the room. I mean, they were in a different rink, probably playing in a different game. They didn't experience the trauma. You watch it on Live Barn, you don't experience the trauma. You're like, oh,
Mike,
wow,
that could really bothers me, guys. What bothers me about this, and Bryce, you said it earlier, and you wrote this in the article, is that the first question was not, how is the kid doing?
Yeah.
That freaks me out. All right. And again, I might be just in the mite level. You know, I've coached at different levels, but when someone gets injured, I generally care. Like, is that person okay? And I know a lot of coaches, by the way, and parents do that. Right? I'm not saying this is isolated, but that freaked me out a little bit that, that was not done. Can you talk to that for a minute? I'm not trying to put the other coach on the spot. I really want to keep saying that, but that bothered me a little bit.
Yeah. And, and look, it's what I honestly thought was going to happen was going to say, like, was that, hey, we've heard you had some injuries. How's it going? How are your players? Like, do you think that this game is going to happen? We're hearing that you're not playing. Hey, it's October 31st. Right. My team really wants to play you guys. We're going to see this team again. Like, there's months, right? There's more tournaments. So it was the lack of perspective in that moment to understand, like, we're going to probably see each other 3-4 more times this year. Right. And that individual wasn't able to just take a pause and just reflect on it. Right. And so, it could have been very easy for me to say that, to not include the coach, right, in, the right. tweets and stuff like that. But the reason why I did that, but I didn't call him by his name or anything, but was for every other coach right. out there, right, that say, hey, wow, what if I was the coach that Bryce was talking about? How would I have handled that situation? And I guarantee that 99, maybe we'll say 100% of us, and I include myself in this conversation before me really feeling I have a social responsibility, would have probably acted maybe somewhat the same as this gentleman. Maybe half of us, whatever that percentage, may have asked about the kids first, but the ultimate goal would have been for that game to happen. So I'm not naive to that fact, right? So what transpired was against the norm. And so this did catch this coach off guard, right? And that's why, people are like, well, Bryce, like, I thought you were going to snap on this guy, right? Like, yeah, I know how to snap. Like, if I got to, drop the gloves, I know how to drop the gloves. But I'm also very sensitive and respectful for everybody's perspective, right? I got in there. I could clearly see that this guy was being irrational. Not saying that I said, like, he looked very articulated, very astute. Like, I can't imagine the pressure that he was under right. for this game to happen. But I did need to include him in this, right? Because so that every other coach can maybe feel like, wow, like, and if anything, maybe what I hope that comes out is at the end of the day, Lee, what hope comes out of this, Mike and Chrissy, is that when we're in these moments, can hopefully people might just have the ability now to just take a deep breath, have perspective, realize, based on their situation or circumstance, in this case, we're talking 12-year-old kids. Again, we're not talking about junior kids or college kids. They don't have a career in hockey yet. That we could just kind of reflect back and realize, there'll be more hockey tomorrow. Right. And I think that's what I hope is going to come out of this. And I'm already starting to see that. I've received phone calls, text messages, from people all the way from owners of youth hockey, all the way from people at the NHL, former NHL coaches of mine, former teammates, youth hockey executives. So that tells me that, people do want to find ways to provide more perspective to everybody.
Oh, good. I'm glad they're not hating on you and you're getting some positive messages.
Well, he's getting some pretty good hate. He's pretty good.
Who's hating on you? Give me their names. I want names right now. It's ridiculous.
Well, look, Christy, the way I look at it is I genuinely am, sincerely saying this is I respect everybody's comments. And like and it doesn't get under my skin. I've been in arenas where 20,000 people are telling me how horse crap I am, when you go into visitors rink. Like I've been trained I played professional hockey, since I've been 16 when I was in junior. I understand how to rinse and repeat, the process, right? Having people criticize you, people have different opinions, but I went through that process, right? I could deal with 15,000 people telling me that, my opinion's wrong. But I've also learned over time is that a lot of those people's opinions probably are not like the four of us on this call. They don't have a son or daughter that's in hockey, right? They're looking at it from, a society perspective, right? Like, how can Salvador deprive these kids of playing this championship game? They don't have full context or perspective of the youth environment. Maybe there are some coaches that think, geez, I can't believe Salvador did this. But perfect, right? Like, I don't expect everybody to agree with my decision, right? I just welcome the opportunity that we're all talking about it, because at the end of the day, somebody has to start saying something. Right. And if anything, like I said, we had some games that we had coming up, and the coaches of those teams, they're like, I've already seen change. They're like, hey, like, how's your team doing, Bryce? Yeah, let's reschedule these games that you have coming up this weekend. Right. Let's do them a few weeks later. Right. So that alone shows me that there's been progress, because I could tell you in the past, if we're scheduled to play a team, there's no way that team's canceling that game. They've got that date circled on their calendar and they want to play us, right? Which is great. Like, I love those games. I love going into those environments. I love the competition. I love the teaching moments. All right. So just even to have a team already say, hey, like, it's not right to play this game right now. It's early in the season. We could put this game on the schedule a month later, right? Was really encouraging to already see that, versus trying to find a way to have the other team see our perspective and go jump through hoops. And so, it's encouraging the response that I've seen so far.
And it should always be kids first. Always should be kids first. You should have a trophy before kids. Come on. I used to
laugh at, I still do, when you'd see like a team down, like, oh, they're missing their starting goalie and their best defenseman. Like, ooh, let's play them now. Like, this is the time we can beat them. I'm like, no, don't you want to beat them when they're fully ready? Like I want to beat the team that, like, it's not like, like you said, it's not, in the NHL level. Okay. If the Devils lose their three best players and you can get them on the next day in a playoff game, yeah, great. Let's play them. Let's get them when they're down. But at a youth hockey event that you have the opportunity to play, the best versus the best, I mean, that's what we should strive for, right? And we should strive for the fact that, I think you're such a high profile person in this situation with a high profile team, and let's face it, a high profile tournament, in the scheme of things. I do think this happens a lot. I think there are enough coaches out there at sports level that see these kind. This is not and I've read the comments on Twitter and some of the, this is not a boo-boo. This is not like a kid that got hit with a shot and then you're like, oh, he can't play. He's really just, doesn't want to get in the game. And my kids are traumatized. This is a major, major event. And I think, it could happen. I'm thinking about all the tournament directors that are cringing right now saying, oh my God, guys are going to be getting out of games for a lot less than this. But I think in the whole realm of what we're thinking about, I think one of the big keys here is your kids, your children, and your families. That's all you're responsible for. And I think being responsible for the other team is obviously noble, and that's great. And thinking about, okay, what's this going to affect when we go on the ice against these guys? But what's the great thing about coaching is that you should know your kids. You should know their mental health. You should know when and how to push their buttons. And I'm sure there's a way for you could have got in there and be like, oh, boys, okay, this is our chance. We're going to do one for Johnny and we're going to go out there and crush these guys. But there's a time and a place for that. And maybe if it's a different situation, if it's a misconduct, like where a kid is, says something to one of your players or mouths off, it's a whole different situation. It's a different way to motivate kids. And I do believe that too. You have to have grit. You have to have passion. You have to have an edge to play at that level, at the highest level. I don't think anybody's saying, and I hope nobody's saying and misrepresenting that this is taking an edge away from kids. I think it's teaching. It's just a way to teach them how to control that edge and where that edge is.
Yeah, where that edge is, where there's a fine line. And look, which a lot of people forget through all this is we already have one kid in the hospital before this incident. We are already playing down. So it's not like, and we just beat a team that's a top 5 team, based off, we're going off rankings, right? So it's not like we're trying to avoid playing the game, or we already we're already down numbers, right? And I already know, like you said, yes, I know how to get kids, to be prepared to play. We did that, right? As I went through, not to bring up what we said earlier, but we brought the kids, the kid jersey into the locker room. We made it a special moment, right? That's all part of the learning process. Those are moments kids need to understand, right? Because it's going to be all the way through all the locker rooms as they get older, right? How do you rally around a situation, right? But perspective,
right?
When an ambulance shows up and a stretcher comes on the ice and the kids are 12 and you already have one kid in the hospital, you have to be the adult in the room to say, hey, this is something different, right? And that, what happened to our team, and maybe it happens all the time, I don't know, but I don't think two kids go to the hospital in a matter of 24 hours and ambulances are showing up all the time, right? It happens, but it's not happening all the time. And so, so maybe if anything, tournaments maybe definitely have a backup plan. Maybe, it's in hindsight, maybe there's a way we could have got the team that we just played to play the final game.
Right. Yeah, right.
Right. Like,
that's what I thought at first. I'm like, why didn't just the other team play?
Yeah, right. But the problem with that, Mike, was it was so chaotic. Right. So it was so chaotic in the locker rooms and in the lobbies that nobody had any rational thought process to say, oh, well, okay, there's still some teams here. Maybe this other team wants to play. Like, if it's genuinely about playing the game, right, and putting these kids to have a championship game, right? Well, there's another team that could have filled in, right? And we can, all, not be maybe having this conversation. But look, things happen for a reason, and and it, not saying that I wanted to be, in this situation, but now that I'm in it, and now that I see the response, it just, I'm, as bad as it may sound, I'm happy it did happen to us, because I really now see that I don't think that there would have been probably another coach had he not been, a former, NHL player, or some former captain, had been with the team for a while, had a strong team that's been in that position for many years to say, this isn't going to happen.
Right.
So when all those things come together, it seemed like it was kind of a situation that was, meant to be.
Right. It's so easy to lose perspective. A couple of questions for you. My heart, first of all, goes out to those parents, because, I've been in those situations where my kid has, gone to the hospital, and it's horrible. So my hearts go out to them. I hope the two players are okay. Are they?
Yeah. So well, they'll probably, I don't want to really discuss, but they're going to be out for some time.
Okay. Good, because
but they're going to recover.
That's my first thing. I'm just worried about those kids. Yeah. It's like I can't stop thinking about them. And also, so when you go forward now with the rest of the teammates, you really have to explain to them, or maybe you don't, and they probably get it, right? Why it was important to rally around their teammates. Were any of the kids just not getting it, or did they have a good perspective?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised to be, that every parent on my team, no one even questioned it. It was actually assumed. And again, I say, like, that's how much, even my team's changed over the last couple of years, because we would have been the other team wanting to play that game. Right. So we, we have different perspective as a team, but we've made mistakes in the past. So I always say that we've made our mistakes. I made my mistakes as coaching youth hockey. But the only, it's a funny story. Like the only kid that was kind of still amped up to play, I tell everybody, was the goalie, right? Because he's like, he can't get out of the mind, out of the mental preparation. He was like, still jacked. He's like, is this game happening, coach? Is this game happening? And And then finally, when he found out it wasn't happening, you just see him like his shoulders just like, oh, like
There's more relief.
Goalie.
Yeah, it's a goalie, right? That's that's what makes them different, right? There's
Yes.
and so, but everyone says, yeah, I absolutely could have had that team back on the ice, and the good and the bad of part of kind of who I am. None of my families would have stood up and disagree, even though all of them are like thanking me for not playing that because they didn't want,
Yeah,
right?
they're relieved. They're relieved. And you took that. I mean, think about the pressure having to go to you. Like I could just imagine it right now, right? Yeah. I'm like, Bryce, listen, my son's in the car. My wife is like, there's no way he can play this game. And a lot of coaches be like, well, how's he ever going to get through adversity? How's he going to fight? How's he going to learn that, well, that's it. Yeah, and I think just the ability to, that is hard. It's hard for because you have a bunch of parents that are all looking around. It's almost like the old, when you get your manager saying, all the parents are saying this. Well, who's saying it? Nobody's saying it. Right. So it's the same thing. It's like, listen, we don't want, we thank you for not allowing us to play because now it's on you, right? Nobody's tweeting about your parents. Yeah. They're on you. And I think, but that's, hey, listen, that's the responsibility too of the position you're in.
Exactly. Right. And that's what I've also learned over the years is, how much, the parents need the coach, to make the right decisions. And how much power the coach does have.
Right.
Right. And it doesn't matter how many times I tell my parents, hey, like you can, and I know I don't follow the 24-hour rule of my team. I'm like, hey, if you need to talk to me. Like, I don't want these issues festering, right? And sometimes, I cringe, because I have that policy, but I've also saw that, it's a little bit different, obviously, in our environment that you can put out some fires that way. But even families that I've been with for years still find it uncomfortable to really want to have an opinion or voice an opinion, especially something like this where, you're making decisions for, a rink, a tournament, right? The team that you're supposed to play, your team, everything. It's a big decision. So I'm not diminishing that, right? And you said earlier, Mike, just like all the tournaments, and they're like, holy cow, like what's Bryce doing here? And right, but at the same token, when you talk to these tournament directors or you talk to different guys, they're like, we can't get any refs, right? Oh, we can't get any refs. You hear that all the parents are going crazy, right? Like, in this, and look, and even in this particular tournament, and I haven't even mentioned this part of it was, I don't know if it was Friday, the week before, we have a close contact, COVID contact. Go through our team. We find this out, right? I think it was Wednesday. So we might not even been able to go to that tournament because, right, like we scramble. We cancel practice the whole week. We're scrambling to get everybody with COVID tests, just so that we don't go up there and bring COVID. Right. So we didn't know if we were going to make it to there. I'm talking with the tournament director. He's stressed out. We're all stressed out because I know that a lot of those teams are coming there. They want to play the team. All right. And so we're even just to get there, right, was a whole drama in itself. Everyone gets COVID tested. All the families get COVID tested. Everybody's negative. Like, thank the Lord on that one. Right. So we were even to get up there, it was just a nightmare for our team. And then, all these other events. And so, like I said, it's, there's a lot going on with everybody's team. And so again, I just keep going back to the perspective. There's no way I'm not saying, hey, we got to change culture and everything overnight and all saying the system's completely broken. Look, it's just these particular moments, understand your environment, the kids, the ages, who you are mentoring, and just make sure that you're making appropriate decisions for them. And by no means am I saying, hey, we got to cancel games because kids are injured, right? Hey, if ambulances are showing up, right, and you're dealing with a pre-puberty team, so probably 13 and under, then I hope some people will really maybe weigh the situation, right? But hey, if you're a junior and you're older and those situations happen. Kids, they're more mature. They can handle those situations. They can handle the emotions. They can realize, hey, like, just because I'm upset, I'm not going to go try to kill this kid.
Yeah, but Bryce, it's not the game. The game's not the next day and the next week. It's the next hour.
Oh yeah,
it's not. Again, if it's the next day, like you did on Saturday, you had an injury.
Yes.
Okay, we get it. And again, it wasn't an injury where the kid hit the post. You're like, oh my god, and we didn't even know he was hurt. Until after the fact. So there's so many lessons here. I mean, forget it. We could go on. I mean, I realize we could go for days, right? Because it's just a matter of saying, well, we want our kids also to be able to say, listen, I'm hurt, coach. Like, I'm really hurt, not hiding it and saying, I've got to play this game, that I've got to rally for the team. You want a level of that, but we also have to have the ability to say, you're hurt. Like, I need you to be a healthy adult. I don't need you to be an elite 12-year-old that is now injured for the rest of their life. Or, and I think, and again, because I remember I played a game. I look at my parents. I'm like, how the hell did you let me play this game? I had a broken rib playing in a state championship game. And the doctor was icing, spraying frozen or whatever, the freeze stuff on my ribs, saying you could get through it. Like, I could have died. Like, I would have never do that. But it's just perspective of where you are in the moment, and nobody being able to say, it's not that big a deal. This is not where I want to go. And I think it's so refreshing to be able to have you be there. And then maybe we can just sit back and say, okay, well, what are the little things we can do to create a better culture in small increments to get back to some reality here. And it's just the starting point is saying, I'm not playing, stepping away.
Right.
Let's reset and live another day.
Evolution takes time. Evolution takes time. And like I said, Mike, you grew up in that era where broken rib was an hour-to-hour injury back at that time.
like insane.
Yeah. Look at concussions just 10 years ago, or 15 years ago, where that was a day-to-day injury. It's not anymore. And Bryce, what you've done here, like all evolutions, you've created a conversation that needed to happen, right? And I also love that you're saying, this isn't going to change overnight. I'm not asking it to. But the conversation's there. And you tapped on this a little bit, but kind of to kind of round this episode out, you've created the conversation. Where do you want this conversation to go? Or where do you hope it goes?
Just, and I said it throughout the hour here, it's just people to regain some perspective, right? That's all I'm asking and including myself. Like, it took me 5-6 years to find this perspective, with my team and other teams that we are interacting with. And so that's the first step. One, having conversations, which we are now having. Like I say myself, I've been in contact with many different people. No one's asking to change the game and all, like, the tournaments, and no one's doing that. They're just like, yeah, you're right, Bryce. Like, we need more individuals just looking at this particular moments in rinks and making sure that we're all holding each other accountable. And that's the first step, because, if not, just the amount of refs alone, if we just start with the refs, not to really tie in the refs, like, every game I have a ref come to me and just tell me how exhausted it is. Right. And, and that they don't want to ref anymore. And the people, we're begging refs. We are literally begging refs to do games, right? Because they don't like the environment. And so if we can't get the environment to change, then we're not going to have refs.
Right.
Right. And I've now have some games where we've got one ref. And it's a competitive game. I already know, like, oh my gosh, like, this is going to be a disaster. Right. Because, I just cringe. Like, it's like, if anything, I'd like to pull out of those games, right? Because, one ref and the poor, individual can't even keep up with the 12-year-olds when it comes to skating. So
we had a nice conversation with your friend Kerry Frazier just about that same subject, just about, how do you expect, like, you look out and you're like, are you the only one here? Like, this is not fair to you. Like, do you know what, you're going to get eaten apart here? Like, not by me, but I said, this is not going to be good for you. And I think, we have this conversation, like, do we really need, 17 games on a weekend where, like you said, it's the same ref over and over and over again. And you're the guy that gets that ref on his last game of the day. It's think about how mentally taxing it is for him or her. I mean, it's, but you're right. It's just, there's so many facets to this that I love where the conversations can go. I think for me, it was like following what the conversation was on Twitter, the negatives and the positives, and then being able to read that and then seeing your article in The Athletic. I think it just gives, I hope that people can see the totality of this and then understand that, to your point, nobody's trying to tell you can't have tournaments and rankings and it's not win at all costs, but let's understand the role we all play as adults in this and as educators and as teachers and as trainers, and just understand as a bigger, we have, I think, just a bigger responsibility for what we can do with our kids.
Absolutely. Because, I'm not going to sit here and say, I don't want to win. I absolutely want to win. Do I want to have a competitive team and mentor these kids and help them along their path? Absolutely. And so, but we just I just saw that this weekend, that the perspective was, we can't play that final game.
Yep. Bryce, this has been a really great hour. It's really educational, inspirational. I want to thank you for doing what you did. And I don't think in any way that was easy. I just think you're a trailblazer in so many ways. This is another one. And thank you for creating the conversation that needed to be happening. It clearly needed to be happening because it's happening. It's happening right out there right now in the digital world. So thank you so much for being here today. Yeah,
well, thanks for having me. Just I appreciate the time.
I think some hockey parents out there who might have been in the camp against, you guys walking out and not playing and sending a strong message need to do a little soul searching, right?
It all takes time. That's, and that's just kind of also my perspective, Chrissy. I don't like to 100% judge people. They'll make their decisions on their terms and their path and their journey. And like I said, even if we help a few situations, we're all for the better.
I agree.
Well, Bryce, thanks so much for being here, and listeners, watchers, thanks so much for being with us. This is going to conclude this edition of Our Kids Play Hockey. Obviously, check us out, ourkidsplayhockey.com, or wherever podcasts are heard. And if you want to jump in this conversation with Bryce, he's on Twitter. He's all over the place. Check him out at Bryce Salvador. That's going to do it for this one. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you.